conflict exists because you're alive. So any conflict is a function of an organism or a system that's alive. So when I was doing early research around conflict in communities, there was very little. And what they found was they found one community that had no conflict, and it was in the process of dying. So things that do not have conflict are not what you're looking for. You're looking for healthy ways to disagree, to find dissent, to be vulnerable, to hold two ideas in your head at the same time and feel safe, or find a way to feel safe. Those are the goals. If your family has no conflict, it means there is no sense of community or connection. If your workplace exists and there's an absence of conflict, that's a highly controlled environment. It's not sustainable, and it means that it will either die or explode.
That's fascinating. So essentially, you're saying conflict is necessary for, basically us to live and like to feel alive almost.
Exactly. And it is a function of being alive.
Welcome to the Healthy Aging Pod. Dr. Emi Garzitto has been developing, promoting, and implementing positive communication practices and conflict support skills for over 27 years. Her doctoral research focused on helping communities learn how to get along. She is a published author of Your Beautiful Trauma, a practical guide to help you convert crisis into full-scale transformation. Hello, Dr. Emi Garzitto. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Very well. Well, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you, likewise.
Already in 2022.
I know. Where did 2021 go?
I know. Well, I'm really glad that you're here. I think this is a great start to the new year, having you as a guest. And we'll dive right in. So I know that you're a conflict coach, and let's talk about that. So as a conflict coach, how would you describe conflict?
Thank you so much for that introduction. So a conflict coach is someone who supports someone at work or at home in managing their conflict in a way where they feel more capable and where they are able to essentially stay in the room when that conflict arises. So rather than using strategies that are about avoiding or completely pretending like it's not there, or putting it on something that is external, something that's outside of you. Conflict coaching is about helping someone become an expert at managing conflict.
Okay. So how can like us as a individual person, how can we identify conflict? So let's maybe start in a work setting. So I'm a manager. There's lots of leaders out there. How could we identify a conflict?
Right. So that's a very good question, in that there are many definitions of conflict. And essentially, as a conflict coach, how I identify a conflict is any experience that causes discomfort or suffering. So that can be a conversation, it can be a look, it can be a relationship, it can be a feeling. And it's about helping someone manage that internal discomfort and address it where it needs to be addressed. So can I sort of add more to that? Or so, like, for example, if someone is, if someone is saying these undercutting words or little sly remarks that make you uncomfortable. Uh, the fact that it makes you uncomfortable or feels hurtful is the tension, is the conflict. It could be another person saying the exact same thing, and it'll be like water off a duck's back. So it's not what essentially is being said or how it's being said, but it's how it's being received. And it's about managing that experience so that you can get better at managing your internal conflict as well as what's happening on the outside.
Okay, so I guess that would apply to basically anyone, whether you're an employee, a manager, anyone, in any setting, it sounds like. Is there such a thing as a healthy conflict?
Well, uh, conflict exists because you're alive. So any conflict is a function of an organism or a system that's alive. So when I was doing early research around conflict in communities, there was very little. And what they found was they found one community that had no conflict, and it was in the process of dying. So things that do not have conflict are not what you're looking for. You're looking for healthy ways to disagree, to find dissent, to be vulnerable, to hold two ideas in your head at the same time and feel safe or find a way to feel safe. Those are the goals. If your family has no conflict, it means there is no sense of community or connection. If your workplace exists and there's an absence of conflict, that's a highly controlled environment. It's not sustainable, and it means that it will either die or explode.
That's fascinating. So essentially, you're saying conflict is necessary for, basically us to live and like to feel alive almost.
Exactly. And it is a function of being alive. So I work with children and families as well. And what I like, one of the important pieces of information that I share is that the conflict is an incredible way to get to know you, to heal you, and to help the people around you be better. So your process at managing your conflict helps the people around you, whether you're in a team at work or in an organization, or whether you are with your best friends, or whether you're at a family gathering with parents and siblings that are masterful at knowing all of your triggers and uncomfortable spots.
So you mentioned this a few times now about managing your own conflict, so your
Yeah.
own internal conflict. And what if we don't know how to do that, or we're not doing that?
Well, and that is job one. So when I'm doing training, increasingly, I am having to spend far more time on that first piece. So if you cannot be aware of what's happening in your body, if you are unaware of your feelings, then you cannot control and navigate the conflict that is around you. The first step in becoming, and I call it conflict alchemy, but the first step in becoming good at conflict, becoming an expert, is learning about your own internal landscape, learning what you do to manage your discomfort or your pain points, and then having a very good toolbox where you are able to use that in the appropriate times and work with your own internal nervous system over and over and over again. That is the fundamental building block in helping you manage conflict. Now, Kelly, occasionally there are people who are good at it right away or who have had lots of modeling at home. And what we are finding is that people are getting more and more, they're getting less practice at all the natural building blocks that we used to have as we developed our brain and our nervous system. And so it is becoming more difficult, and that people need more practice at that internal landscape piece.
So I have your book here. So if everyone can see that it's like your beautiful trauma. And it's a guide here to help convert crisis into full-scale transformation. And you do speak a lot on sort of crisis and trauma. And then you talk on repeated conflicts. And I was wondering if you can kind of explain that a little further.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to. So, a conflict is a mini crisis. It is sort of your natural body, your natural way of practicing for the big things. So, every time we have conflict, we have an opportunity to take care of something that needs our attending. So, when there is a repeated conflict, when there is a pain point that is constant, that finds you in your workplace, in your home, where you work out, it seems to follow you. That is a great sign that is saying, if you do not attend to this repeated conflict, 100% you will receive a crisis. So when we look at what bugs us most, where do we fight? Where are those pain points? Where is that uncomfortable place that I constantly find myself in? That's a great place to start that personal work at learning to manage your internal conflict and to work with that so that you can become that master conflict problem solver.
And can this, you talked about it, it's like repetition. So can it repeat across your lifetime if you're kind of not addressing it?
Till the day we die, and we can take that home with us, right? So the goal, the way I see it, the goal is to live our life with as much tools and opportunities to manage and heal all of those repeated conflicts that point to those pain points that probably showed up very early in our life, and that again are saying, hey, this requires my attention. There's something here that I need to pay attention to and look at more closely. And if it hurts me, even though it might be somebody external or something external that is bringing this pain, it's my job to take care of this pain. It's my work to fix it. It's my job to either learn the skills to push back and communicate more effectively, and also to explore why is this so painful?
So you mentioned the need to have to manage yourself in order to manage others, and as well managing your own internal nervous system. Can you further elaborate on that?
Um, I would love to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a concrete example. So I was working with a client who was partnered in a startup with someone who was not meeting their deadlines and not meeting their obligations. And in the process of hiring me and working through the actual logistics of how do you speak to this person, what are the words that you say, that was the one, that's one piece of what we did and that we practiced and rehearsed. How do you work and speak in a way that you are allowing the other person not to feel threatened, but also be clear about there's a problem and there are some concerns. The other piece that we work on is what is this bringing about in you? What yes, there's a lot of money on the table, and that's always stressful. But where do you feel that discomfort? And I will literally ask, where do you feel it? And what do you feel? Because increasingly clients are not even aware of what they are feeling and get disconnected in the out of their body, get disconnected by trying to be problem solve out there to avoid what's happening in there. Conflict asks you to go inside and look there. Otherwise, that conflict will come back again and again and again. If we don't do that inner work, we will see that conflict arrive and come back. So when we're able to go, this hurts, this, I feel it here, and to make connection about what that's about. And oftentimes it's about a story that is rooted in our childhood or in feeling harmed by people that we cared about. And it's the courage and the awareness to be able to get to some place where you can attend to that so that the next time it happens, you're just not rehearsing a script and repeating words, but you are also able to manage your uncomfortable feelings, your discomfort, your internal chatter, and you're more able to successfully maneuver that conflict. It's powerful. You get to hold that powerful space in the room when you are able to also hold your vulnerability and your pain.
So let's just say you have built up that awareness for this pain, this trauma, this conflict within yourself, this feeling that you have that just doesn't feel good to you. Is it then when you would, acknowledge this to the other person that, this, would you express that? Because one of the things you did say was we'll avoid the feeling within ourselves, but then we also avoid that confrontation with the other person to let them know that, we don't want to be treated that way or spoken to in that manner. How does that, I mean, there's definitely steps to this process, and you've addressed that there's a lot of self management that needs to take place first. And then is the next step then to move on and actually address that with this person that where you're feeling this conflict?
So that's the other piece. So not every conflict is managed the same way, and not everybody is going to get the big confrontational talk or the big words. It is situation specific. So when two partners are talking, the language and the focus is going to be on the external negotiation and how to do that in a way where you stay in the room. When the person in front of you says those trigger words, that you are able to stay the course and hold fast to your objectives and to be clear about them. That's different than if I want to create intimacy with my life partner, in which case then I am also sharing some of that vulnerability. I am sharing some of that work. And depending on your partner, That might be in small little baby steps. Not everybody's able to hear the whole big touchy feely piece of work, and sometimes we turn people off by giving them too big of a mouthful, and then we have to work really hard to regain their trust. So it's situational, and it's small steps, and it's working on what is your outcome, right? So in the case of the two partners, the outcome is going to be, I would like a clear objective as to whether you're going to follow this timeline, or whether we just need to sign a contract and cut you loose. Like, we need to figure out a this or that. It might be that, but it also might be practice. It might be you talking to your adolescent child and just trying to build relationship and model connection. And then you might be having small bits of conversation or connection, and working in small steps to build trust. It works. It's different for intention. Like, what is your intention? What's your goal? What's my environment? Am I doing this at work, or am I doing it in a home? And what are what are the strengths and weaknesses of the person who's receiving this information?
That practice, it is a practice, because I think
Lifelong.
everything that you were saying it sounds so, as simple as you made it sound, it's not simple at all.
No.
And like, one of the things that I would say is the most would be very challenging, like in a work, especially in a work environment, is that you first have to acknowledge your own, like, internal conflict, right? And if you were in a leadership position, that's a lot of self-awareness that you would have to have. And, you know, from your perspective of a researcher in conflict, and I take a yogic perspective, and I've done research in yoga, and self-awareness is a big part of the practice as well. But to get there, it takes a long time for people to build on that self-awareness and build that in order for them to even get to the point where they're able to acknowledge that conflict with this other person and be able to be what you had mentioned, whether it's vulnerable or confrontational, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very fascinating
Yeah.
in what you're needing to do. And I guess to kind of go on to that, I actually am curious to know, as a conflict coach, what is conflict coaching?
So conflict coaching is supporting a team, an individual, or a community in managing their internal discomfort as well as their external discomfort. And in real terms, it means when I'm unhappy about something that happens, I have the skills, tools, and responsibility to take care of it myself. Not go to HR, not go to my mommy, but I have the skills, tools, and responsibility to manage all of those pieces. That's what conflict coaching is. It's about helping people manage their discomfort, whether that comes from the inside or from an outside source. And what I often tell clients is that the person who is able to do that is the most powerful person in the room. The person who is able to manage their internal conflict and the chaos or what's happening on the outside, they are the most powerful person in the room. And so the work is continuous, it's lifelong, it's small steps repeated over and over, and it's painful. And the goal is that when you become an expert in conflict, you get to use that pain and that discomfort and make powerful change, not just to you, but to the communities that mean something to you, and that uh, are communities that you value.
And so I know in your book, so you do speak on some strategies and you give tips
Mm.
as well, which I think are extremely valuable for what, you know, we can do. And, it's thought provoking because there's questions that we have to ask ourselves. And it can, I'm sure, like it can get very hard to ask these questions to ourselves because it's meaning like I have to actually address that it's me and not them, because
Mm.
a lot of times, like I said, conflict, we think I have a conflict with this other person, so it's this other person's fault.
Right,
Whereas that's not
right.
necessarily the case, where you're saying it's actually something's triggered you, right? Like you
Yeah,
mentioned right at the beginning that sometimes you can have this two different people saying the exact same thing to you. One person's a trigger, the other person, you didn't even notice that they said it.
right, right. It's a relationship. There are two systems that have to work together in order for conflicts to happen. Even if it's internal, you've got two sides of you having some kind of um, a balancing act. So you're in relationship when you are fighting, and I am not in any way saying that if somebody is, somebody's undercutting you or slandering you, like all of these things are not okay, and they're unkind, and they're doing it from their own pain point, and you can help them a lot by being clear, managing you, and holding that mirror back to them so that they then have to look at their own pain. And that's what we do when we manage conflict. We help each other, we rub against our pieces that need work, and there are opportunities for healing.
So I guess that would be one of the strategies, in a being able to manage the conflict. Do you have any other strategies that you think are the most helpful for us?
Yeah,
Whether it
yeah. I mean, what I'm going to give you, like, so that the listener can just have some quick takeaways. So, one is slow down. When we when we get triggered or upset, when we're in pain, or when somebody says something that is hurtful, our response is going to be to hurt that person back. And if we can just slow the process down and take a couple of breaths and not do anything, that's helpful. Like, get your prefrontal cortex in the picture before you say something. uh, so a lot of times just taking that breath and just going internal is going to buy you some time. So that's one. The first tip would be slow down. This, I'm going to give you three. Is that okay?
perfect.
Okay, so the second tip would be that when someone is in a high state of arousal, when they're angry or excited, we see a lot of people who are struggling to manage their own nervous system. So talk a lot or um, blurt things out rather than respond. If we just paraphrase back what they've said, that's another example, a way of just slowing things down. but also buying you some time about what you want to do. So somebody says, wow, that is a nice outfit you're wearing there, Garzitto. And if I say, hey, so you like my outfit, or you're not liking my outfit, I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. And I can make a joke of it, I can be playful, but I am slowing things down by just finding a way to hear them hear their own words. So that's my second thing. And the third, the third tip would be when you are um, in conflict, and this is a lovely one for when you have connection with someone, and there's a lot of feeling behind what they're saying, whether that's about you or someone else. Rather than make a statement, solve the problem, or try to fix it, is to just ask what else. Just listen and say, what else? Let them continuously say all the stuff that's in their head. So do nothing, like slow it down, um, say what else, or repeat back what you've heard.
Good tips. Good tips. So, we're talking about managing conflict and, you know, the fact that you're a conflict coach and you've done a whole PhD on this as well. Why would someone think this is important? Like why is this important to our health? Our you talked about the nervous system. You uh you have also mentioned brain-based research as well, the relation to the conflict and brain-based research.
Yeah.
So what's the real, why is it important for people to actually manage their conflict? Because I could see a lot of us being like, I don't.
Right. Right. Uh, so there's 2 points. So I'll go back to how we started. Conflict is an indicator of life. So in order to be a good living being, you need to earn and learn about conflict. It is a function. It's not going to go away. We have to figure out how to make peace with it, and how to even use that as a powerful tool for growth, for healing, and for deeper connection and intimacy. So, number one, we're not going to take this out. We can pretend, but it is a function of living. And then the second thing I would say is that with the increased information around our trauma and the brain, and um, brain research and neuroplasticity, the evidence around unresolved conflict and how it affects your body is staggering. And so we know that there are lots of reasons in terms of your heart, your autoimmune disorders, an increase in obesity, an increase in health outcomes, longevity in marriages and long-term relationships. The reason for wanting to get good at conflict is because it is so good for your body, and unresolved conflict is so bad for your body. And I mean, uh, the evidence is staggering now. Like we are clearly aware that this affects our body, and it affects our learning and our ability to learn as well.
So I essentially had shivers, like your positive, I think that's definitely something that we need to address probably clearly here, is that we need to think of conflict as not of a negative, as a positive thing, that it's healthy. But in order for us to see this as a healthy part of our life, we do need to address, like you said, our own internal triggers or traumas, things that cause us to actually, I guess, feel that conflict, and then be able to strategize to manage that, and so that it is healthy conflict throughout our lifetime, versus, like, I think the most of us kind of define conflict as, the second you hear conflict, it's a very negative connotation to conflict, versus how you had expressed it. And I love that, because it's it's healthy, and it's necessary for us to actually, like, live and live happily, but we have to be able to figure out how to manage that. So that's so beautiful. I love that.
Thank you. I'm a beginner. I'm working on it as much as I know it. I am learning and relearning and training my own brain. And I think it's going to be till the day I die.
That's what I say about yoga practice. Is
Yeah.
that everything's like it's a practice forever. It doesn't end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much. This has been so like eye-opening for me. I think this is going to be so helpful for, people to hear and to understand, and, like I said, to really sort of see conflict as in a different light, in a different perspective. And so I do want to say thank you so much for being my guest today. Happy New Year to you. And yeah, have a wonderful day.
Yeah. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Just even the breathing that you started, and I can watch you, um, that your kindness and encouragement made this so much easier. So you actually modeled some of the stuff that we were talking about today, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, ciao.
Bye now.